In this video, I'm going to show you how to replace the exhaust manifolds on this Ford F-350 with the 6.2 liter V8 engine. This particular one is the driver's side, but the procedure is exactly the same for the passenger side. Just make sure you have the right part because it's directional. They each go to their own side. Let's get started. Right now we're looking straight up on the driver's side, and you'll see where the exhaust pipe meets the manifold, right up there with two mounting nuts. I'm going to use a little bit of rust penetrant on those threads just to help the mounting nuts come off a little bit easier. Use a 15mm socket. You may need a swivel for at least one of these mounting nuts. Okay, well, the stud came out, mounting nut stayed. That's all right, we can work with that. Let's take the other mounting nut off. I'm going to apply some heat to my mounting nut because it's not breaking free, and hopefully with some heat, I can hammer a socket on there and get it to come off. Got it. Make sure this flange drops down. For this job, it is easiest to remove the wheel of the side that you're working on, so safely raise and support the truck. Some wheels may have a center cap like this one, others might not. If yours does, all you need is a little pry bar or screwdriver to pop it out. It should have a cutout, so just look around to find it and pry it right off. That'll expose all 8 21mm lug nuts. So with a 21mm socket, remove them all. Now remove the wheel and set it aside. Now your vehicle is going to have a fender liner that you need to remove, typically a couple 5.5mm screws on the wheel arch and a couple 10mm bolts holding it on to some brackets. However, my brackets for this fender liner have rotted away, so the vehicle does not actually have a fender liner, which means I can't show you how to remove it or install one later. But, like I said, a couple bolts and it should be right out. And now once you have the fender liner removed, you can see the hardware holding the top of the manifold in. I'm going to put a 13mm socket on here with a swivel, and with a hammer, I'm going to tap it onto the mounting nut. Well, as I was tapping my socket on, the stud broke. So this will have at least one stud to extract out of the head. That happens. All right, well, on to the next one. Well, we're down to the last one, and that's going to be the third one from the bottom right over there. Now you can grab onto the exhaust manifold, pull it off the studs, pull it off the exhaust pipe. There it goes. And slide it right out through the wheel arch. And there it is. There's the manifold. We have one stud to pull out of the head, and on the flange, on the exhaust pipe, one stud to remove. And there it is. Well, it's cleanup time. So first, remove the old gaskets from here. These multi-layer steel gaskets, you can actually reuse if you'd like to. They usually seal up the best, but if you want to use new ones, go right ahead. However, if you're going to reuse these, clean them up with a wire brush and make sure that they don't have debris preventing them from sealing up. Next, I would like to remove the remaining mounting studs so that I can clean this surface properly. Also, it's not a great idea to reuse these. Usually you want to install new hardware every time you're dealing with exhaust like this because it gets brittle over time. So if you're going to replace the manifold, you might as well replace all the hardware at the same time. I'm going to use an extractor socket and just try to get all these studs out of here. Well, it looks like this stud is compromised. It has started to move. Yep. So it looks like we have two studs to extract. Got it. All right, all the studs are out. Now we can clean the mounting surface. I'm going to pull the spark plug wires out. That way I can use a sanding block at the end and just make sure it's all clean and flat. And otherwise the spark plug wires are just gonna be in my way. All right, tuck them up out of your way. Now, let's get a gasket scraper and or a razor blade. And then at the end, a sanding block and get the surface as clean as we can. With the surface as clean as it's gonna get, it's time to extract our two broken studs. Hopefully, none broke for you, but for me, like you saw, two of them broke. Now, they are the two all the way in the back, which actually helps me out because I have plenty of room to work with. You have a few options to extract these. You could do what I'm doing here and use a welder if you have access to it. Be very careful. You wanna preheat the metal a little bit and then weld some material onto the stud. Since mine broke a little bit recessed into the head, I have to do that. If it didn't, great, you don't have to. You just put a nut on there and weld it. The other option is to drill them out. I prefer to weld before I start drilling, just because drilling into a steel bolt that's threaded into an aluminum head can go wrong very, very easily. Welding a nut onto this one worked perfectly fine for me. I got it out, and we're gonna do the same to the other one, just not going to show it because it's the same exact procedure. Afterwards, give it one last cleaning, and we're ready to install the new manifold. One last thing we have to do is clean up the pipe right here where the manifold meets it, because there's no gasket. This is just a press fit design, and if it's not clean, it's not going to seal up. The easiest thing I found is if you have a die grinder with an abrasive disc on it, that's the best thing to use, just because it's the easiest. If not, you could just use a wire wheel on a drill, get it in here, it's just a little bit larger, and then clean up the surface. That feels very smooth, looking clean. It's perfect. Now let's get the new manifold in position. I know I don't have any gaskets here yet, and that's because I like to put this in first, then the gaskets. That's gonna make it quite a bit easier. All right. If you're using the studs provided with the gasket kit, and of course the manifold, just thread them right in with the short side into the manifold. I put a little bit of anti-seize on the threads just to help them slide in and, well, hopefully not seize too much in the future. And with a 7mm socket, you can snug them up. There we go, those are installed. Now I have my new gaskets, and if you had new studs, you know, the hardware that mounts it to the head, you would want to put them in now. I actually am going for bolts just because that's what I have, and you want to make sure that whatever you use is obviously the right thread pitch. So I'm going to try to start at least one in. And that one started. So with this one started, I can line up my gasket by putting in the second one over here. And then we'll do the gasket on the front. With all of these at the top properly started in, which, by the way, it's very important to pay attention how they thread in. You don't want to cross thread them because it's very easy to do so. This is aluminum that you're threading into, and steel bolts will easily cut new threads. So you want to make sure that it goes in nice and smooth. These all did for me, so it's time to start in the bottom ones, and then we can tighten everything up properly in sequence up against the head. Now I'm going to take a ratchet and gently tighten them all up just so the manifold can be pressed up against the head, and then we will start our torquing sequence. Now the torque sequence on this is 2 different passes. We're going to torque them to 18 foot-pounds first, and then 24 foot-pounds. That's the final torque. The sequence will start at the top rear bolt. Second one is going to be the lower rear. Then we actually move to the front, and we tighten up the top front and then the lower front. And then we go back to the second from the rear, top, bottom, and then the second from the front, top and bottom. So basically 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Once again, 18 foot-pounds and then 24. Do your best to sneak a torque wrench in here. If you can't, well, then just do your best to tighten them by hand, but if possible, torque them down. All of these are torqued to 18 foot-pounds, so now let's go back in the same sequence to torque them to 24 foot-pounds. There was only one that I was not able to torque, and that is the second from the rear on the lower one. I just could not get my torque wrench in there no matter what, so I did my best with a ratchet. That was about the same length as the torque wrench, and I just felt it out, applied about the same amount of force. If you can't torque all of them with a torque wrench, that's okay, as long as you do your best by hand to get them all nice and snug. What you want to do is compress that gasket without getting these too tight, of course, so it can all seal up. Once again, 24 foot-pounds in the same sequence. Here we go. This one I already know I can't get with a torque wrench, so I'm doing it by hand. At this point, all of my hardware on the head is torqued down, ready to go. If you want to double check it, go ahead. So let's go back down on the pipe end and reconnect the manifold there. I have a stud that came out of the manifold and the nut is stuck on it. The other one, if you remember, came off, but this one is going to have to be removed. So I'm going to put a pair of locking pliers up top here, heat up the mounting nut, and hopefully that'll allow it to come right off. The locking pliers is, of course, just to hold the stud in place. All right. Got it. All right, so now we wait for this to cool down and then put this back on. Now let's get the flange over the studs and get the two mounting nuts threaded on. Once these are started, snug them up. You want to make sure you go slowly and you want to go side to side. That way the pipe can seat itself evenly on the manifold. Like I said, there is no gasket here, so you want to make sure that it is fully seated properly so it can seal up. The torque on both of these is 30 foot-pounds. This new hardware is 15 millimeter in size. All right, that's both of them. One last thing to do up here is to put the spark plug wires back on. So just take them one at a time, put them on the plug, make sure they clip on and lock in. You should feel them click into place. At this point, you would put your fender liner back on. Once again, mine is missing, but just a few bolts and it should be bolted up in place. Let's get the wheel on. Install all 8 lug nuts. We'll bottom them out in a cross pattern to seat the wheel evenly, and then also in a cross pattern, we'll torque them to 165 foot-pounds. Once again, 165 foot-pounds in a cross pattern. Here we go. Double check them if you want. I'm sure that mine are tight. So now, because I had this cover, I'm going to put this back on, line it up, if yours had it, with the lug nuts, and then tap it on. Job is done. Now when you take this for a road test, keep in mind there will be smoke coming from that manifold because the oils are going to burn off of it.
When only the best will do, demand TRQ. The only company that lets you view before you do. TRQ is committed to offering the highest quality aftermarket auto parts that are engineered for peace of mind. Thanks for using and viewing with TRQ.